Hello everybody, my name is Nemo and today I'm showing you my deck build for Rogues Gallery. Gallery of Rogues, I guess. Instead of a gallery that belongs to one rogue, it is a gallery of rogues. Given the way the apostrophe is placed in the deck name. Anyways, lands, all of them. Because there's an annoyingly bad mana curve in this deck that can't really be fixed that easily. I've done my best with it. I've did my best. Double passed. I don't know. But it really still kind of sucks. So you need to run all the lands to try and help that a little bit. Because you're gonna be mana screwed quite a bit with this deck, unfortunately. And that's just the case. So 25 lands there. This deck is definitely not meant for 1v1. It's definitely meant for two-headed giant is what I think is the best place to play this deck. Definitely if you combo it with the mill deck, it could prove to be very effective. I don't play two-headed giant that much, so I wouldn't know, but I think it could be effective comboed with the mill deck. There are some mill cards in here. If you build it specifically for that purpose, I'm sure you should be able to get a decent result, if not a pretty good result. But in 1v1 this deck kinda sucks, so that's unfortunately the case, but it's not terrible. You can definitely win with the deck, so I'm showing you how I built it for 1v1 now. Anyways, extract does absolutely nothing. That's exactly like, yeah, I mean, just give it a good reading. That does nothing, so don't run it. Infiltrate, it kind of does something, but not enough. I mean, yeah, it's really cheap, but it's also, the cost is not the mana. The cost is that it's a card that you're drawing instead of a different card that would do more. And this just doesn't do enough. So it's not worth a card. It's definitely worth 1 mana, but it's not worth a card. If it cantripped, then it would have been worth a card. But it doesn't, so it's bad. Agony Warp, it's not the best removal, but it's the removal you got. It's great if you can use it when somebody attacks and give their one guy -3, -0 and kill the other guy. Of course that's great. And I wouldn't mind running a few of these in the deck, but this is the main removal I got, and I'm not happy, because if they play anything with 4 toughness, then what am I doing? Well, pretty much nothing, and that's a big problem this deck has. Of course, again, in two-headed giant, not that big of a problem if you're playing together with a deck that has a lot of removal, or the mill deck, which can keep them busy long enough, then it's not a problem. But in 1v1 it is a problem, and this deck suffers from it, but unfortunate. Glimpse the Unthinkable, proof that this deck is meant to combo with mill in two-headed giant. Can't think of another reason you would ever want to run this card though. Invisible Stalker just doesn't fit the deck. The only This is meant to be used with equipment or enchantments, and the only enchantment that would be worth placing on it isn't that great on Invisible Stalker, because it's mono blue rather than dual colored. So there's really no purpose to Invisible Stalker in this deck, unless you think you somehow need a hexproof creature. But there's no point in a hexproof creature if you're not taking advantage of it, you know. And taking advantage of it is usually done by placing equipment or enchantments upon it. Then there's Dimir Guildmage. Well, it's a 2/2 for 2 hybrid mana, so it's already good. His abilities oftentimes aren't really useful, but Grizzly draws discards, I guess. I don't know. So draw, discard, I don't know, it's you can only use it as sorcery speed, but that doesn't really matter that much. I guess it's in there because making someone discard at sorcery speed could lock them out of the game if they're top decking, so that's why that restriction is there. Other than that, yeah, It's 2 mana, 2/2, so you run it pretty much. This guy, 2/1, but it's unblockable. Problem is it can't block either. I don't know, it's decent. If you're gonna worry about pyromancers or dudes like that tap and kill you guys, then you shouldn't be running this deck. But then again, you probably shouldn't be running this deck anyway in 1v1. But it's a fun deck, so I guess you run this deck for fun and rather than getting great results or anything. But yeah, it does suffer from having only 1 toughness, and sometimes you just want a guy that can block, and this isn't it. But you gotta run it, cause the mana curve, again, not that great. You wanna run some early dudes. And Walking Corpse, basically, yeah, I mean, it's a vanilla 2/2. It's not unblockable like the other thing, but at least this has 2 in the back, and it can block their creatures. And I think I consider Walking Corpse a little bit better in this deck, at least the way I'm running it. Infernum Infiltrator combos well with an enchantment in this deck, but you'll see. Mask of Riddles, 2-cost artifact. Yeah, give a guy fear, and he's probably unblockable unless they're playing black or have an artifact creature. And he lets you draw cards. I mean, you just make a guy unblockable with this. It's a decent card. It's not great, but it's decent. The Mere Cutpurse, 2/2 guy that draws you cards and makes them discard. Usually it doesn't get in, but that's okay, because what does happen is that you play this guy turn 3, and now they can't attack you unless they deal with your dude first. And that's sometimes useful enough, because if they're staying back, then they're at least not attacking you, and you're not taking that damage. And your deck, again, with this mana curve, is a little bit slow, so you don't mind game going a little bit longer than usual. So that's cool. So even if he doesn't get in, he's still probably useful to you. So, great card in general. But you'll see a little bit of theme with this deck is that this guy is 3 mana and he's 2/2. And most of your guys are a little bit downsized for their cost. And that's a little bit unfortunate. Nurok Invisimancer, pretty good. Yeah, he can block, even though he's unblockable himself, so that's only a bonus. And again, it's a 2. It only has 1 toughness, but I already gave in to running 1 toughness creatures with Infernum Infiltrator, so I might as well run this as well, I guess. But Nurok Infiltrator is actually pretty good, because if you play this guy turn 3, now they're staying back, so they can block it. Then dropping this dude turn 4 means that they didn't get in, and your guy did get in. And now that's a really good tempo swing. And you've got an unblockable dude. So yeah, great tempo swing in fact. And definitely would prefer to have 4 of these rather than 2 Phantom Warriors. But unfortunately I don't have the choice. Phantom Warrior is decent. Not great. Certainly not great. Again, it's a free cost 2/2. So, you know, it's downsized. It's not as powerful as it should be. The reason this was great in Realm of Illusion because it's an illusion, and that deck had stuff that bumped illusions, and made illusions better, and it was a little bit more of an aggressive deck. So yeah, but it's basically it's an early drop that isn't awful, so you run it pretty much. Barony Vampire, terrible card, 3/2 vanilla dude for 3 mana. I consider it worse than Walking Corpse. I did think I needed to run. I needed to choose between the two pretty much, because there's just not enough early drops to go without running these vanilla dudes. But I consider Walking Corpse to be infinitely better due to it only being 2 mana. So there's that. And I ran Walking Corpse in Ghoulkeeper, and I still consider Ghoulkeeper one of the very best decks in Jules 2012. So why wouldn't I run the Walking Corpse in one of the very worst decks of Jules 2013? I mean, yeah, it's a bad card, but it fits the purpose there of being a 2-drop that does stuff. Well, it doesn't really do stuff. It gets in there, I guess. Crafty Path Mage is bad because a lot of your creatures don't have 2 power or less. so it doesn't work with them. And it's a 1/1 for free mana. For free frickin' mana. All my dudes are already small enough. Why do I want even smaller dudes? Scroll Thief, 1 power for free mana. Not enough. Just not good enough. Drawing a card is pretty decent. I just really wish that this was Shadow Mage Infiltrator. Or aka John Finkel. That would have been great. Like, I don't see why this isn't Shadow Mage Infiltrator. Would have made more sense. Shadow Mage Infiltrator, if you don't know, is one colorless, blue and a black, and it has fear, as well as when it deals damage, draw a card, and it's a 2/2 rather than a 1/3. So basically, kind of the same card, but it has 2 power, and it also has fear. So it plays into the unblockable stuff, as well as having a little bit more power. So that would have been a much better inclusion here, rather than Scroll Thief. But unfortunately, we don't get that, and Scroll Thief isn't good enough. Royal Assassin, great. If you're attacking them with unblockables, that means that they have a lot of attackers coming your way. So something that can deter that is amazing. Soul Manipulation, it's a counterspell, so you pretty much run it. You don't always wait for the perfect moment to use this. If you're going to, like, if you have a dominating board presence, then hanging on to a counterspell is usually better than dropping a dude. Even if you don't have a creature in the graveyard, you basically ignore that part for whether you want to reuse this card or not. Unless you absolutely need that creature back that's in the graveyard, then it's already in the graveyard. That's not really what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is whether you wait for a creature to hit the graveyard before you keep mana open to use this. And I say no, that's not the way you use this. You use this by having a dominating board position and then counterspelling what they play and having an even more dominating board position the following turn. That's how you use a card like this. And if it just so happens to be the case that there's a creature in your graveyard, then that's all the better. Moving on, Ashling is great, like one of the very best creatures in the deck. Makes them lose creatures. So yeah, great card in general. And certainly really good with Nurok Invisimancer. If you play Ashling, follow it up with a Nurok Invisimancer, you're in a very good position there. So that's great. Baron Spite, not amazing, but again it's removal, and you gotta run the removal the deck has. It's only 6 cards in total, so you can't go without any of them. But like Agony Warp, it has a problem, which is if they only drop 1 creature, you're screwed. So let's hope and pray that they drop more than 1 creature if you have Baron Spite, so you can make them pick up 1 and kill the other. Yeah, so if they drop 1 creature with 4 toughness, this deck can't do anything. Pretty much, that's what I'm saying. And that's the problem with these removal spells. But, I mean, they're not bad removal spells. I'm certainly not saying they're bad removal spells. I'm just saying that if these are the only removal spells you have, then you're in trouble. A deck, like, I would run 1 Baron Spite, you know, and 2 Agony Warps, and then fill the deck with other removal spells that are a little bit more straightforward and are, you know, less high risk, high reward. Because if you only have high risk, high reward removal spells, then you're gonna get in a lot of positions where you just don't have the right removal spell, and that sucks. Glenelendra Liege, it's a Liege, so you're on it. But this thing only has flying, so it's pretty bad. Only the Liege in Berserker Rage is worse, because that thing doesn't even have flying, it only has the bump ability. But that's a 3/4 or a 4/3, I think. So there's that. This guy is a little bit small for his size, but hey, that fits the deck, right? Everything is pretty small for his size. That's also a reason Ashling is great, by the way, because it's 4/4 for 4. Abyssal Spectre, and not good enough. The discard is too slow at 4 mana, and the guy is a 2/3 flyer, which is too small. I mean, the same goes for Glenelendra Liege, but at least that pumps up your other guys, which helps out the other guys, which are also too small, so that's good. Helm of the Gas Lord. Oh wait, actually, let's talk about Flight of Fancy first, I guess. Too slow. Flight of Fancy is too slow. at 4 mana, I don't want to be drawing cards. That's too late in the game. This format is too fast for cards like this. The flying does help sometimes by helping me get in Ashling or something like that. But it's certainly not the main thing I need to be afraid of with this deck. Like, the main weakness I want to address with this build is the fact that most of my creatures are too small, or too slow, or most of my spells are too slow to really compete with the other decks, at least in 1v1. So that's why I focus on mainly stuff that helps me deal with their creatures, or stuff that's a little bit faster, or big creatures, stuff like that. So yeah, Helm of the Gas Lord certainly helps in the bigger creatures department. Then there's another problem with the deck, is that the creature count is kind of low. Even with the best build, I'm still at 56.4. I would like to be at 60, or at least closer to 60% creatures, but unfortunately I can't quite get there. I could add another Moroi and take this out, and then I'm at a decent percentage. But I don't want to do that because the Morois end up hurting me. But anyways, the Helm of the Gas Lords. Yeah, the first time I looked at this deck, I was like, oh wow, this is the card that is the most important in this deck. I gotta pretty much build the whole deck around this card. Turns out not to be the case. I'm sure this card is great in Two-Headed Giant, where the format is a little bit slower. But in 1v1 this just doesn't cut it. A lot of my creatures aren't dual colored, which is a problem. So I have to have a dual colored creature. I have to not have it die by them. And then I have to play this on it. And if the dual colored creature is like Dimir Cutpurse, then it's kind of redundant anyway. So then you'd rather have something that helps Dimir Cutpurse, or indeed Ashling the Extinguisher, or cards like that, get in there to do their trickery, because the most important cards in this deck are the ones that have abilities that trigger when you deal combat damage to a player, rather than cards that are unblockable of themselves. So basically, it's better to help your guys that have those abilities get in there with Flight of Fancy than it is to help your unblockables actually do something. So then once I realized that, I went and built the deck after Flight of Fancy. But also Flight of Fancy isn't good enough. So yeah, the cards are just too slow. 4 mana enchantments, too slow. So I'm running one Helm of the Gas Lord, because it does help with the fact that my creatures are too small, and it helps them get a little bit bigger. But I don't want to run too many of these, because again, the creature count. So yeah, there's that. But basically, this strategy, I'm sure it's great in Two-Headed Giant. It just doesn't cut it in 1v1. You'll get some lucky wins with it, but it's not consistent enough, not nearly consistent enough to do well in over multiple games. So it's not consistent enough to do well consistently. Lol. So Memory Plunder, pretty much just a good card. Worst case scenario, you get their Murder, or anything, or another removal that's lower cost than this thing. And well, I guess worst case scenario is they don't ever have a spell in their graveyard, but that just doesn't happen that often. Like they usually always have something, and it's usually something good that you want to Memory Plunder. And every once in a while, you get to Memory Plunder a let's say what's the card that makes you destroy 3 permanents in the 5-color deck? That thing in Mana Mastery. Well, anyways, that's pretty much best case scenario. Every once in a while, you get to use that card against them, or something like that, or something ridiculous, or you get to get bribery. I don't know. Just for once in a while, this card is amazing. Most of the time, it's just decent and does well. And even getting a removal spell out of the graveyard, like, that's great, because your removal has trouble, like I said. Moroi, yeah, 4/4 for 4, and it flies. And I did say that most of my creatures are too weak in comparison, but that is a problem because by the time I get to turn 4, I'm usually taking a lot of damage, and losing 1 life then at upkeep actually hurts you a lot more than you'd think. I mean, there's a reason Pillory of the Sleepless is great. So I definitely don't want too many of these, but I could fit 1 in, so I did. Sangromancer, flying free for 4. Yeah, has some cool abilities, and gaining life again, pretty useful in this deck, because you're probably losing the race, at least early on. Necromantic Bliss, pretty good, but too slow, I think. See, the problem with cards like this is they're amazing if the game goes long, but in this format, when does the game really go long? Like, when do you both end up top decking? How many games? How many games out of 10? Like 1 out of 10 maybe? So, this card is pretty much great 1 out of 10 times, decent like 2 out of 10 times, and bad the rest of the time. So, that's just my way of thinking about it. Shoreline Salvager, if you really hate the Morois, I guess you can add this guy instead of the 1 Moroi. You could also add this guy instead of the Helm of the Gas Lord if you figure that the Helm of the Gas Lord isn't that great. Personally, I didn't really find room for it, but he's not terrible. Like, he's decent, he's a hill giant, and he does some stuff. But yeah, didn't really find room for him. Unliving Psychopath is just bad. I wish this guy was an obedient dead, because he's amazing there. He would be amazing there, is what I'm trying to say. But in this deck he's bad, because there's too much black involved. There's too much black involved. The only time in my life I can say that without being racist. Enjoy. So up to the 5 mana. Now I definitely want to just get some threats out there. 5 mana. So Dire Undercurrents, again, great if the game goes long, but same story as with the Necromantic first. Game probably isn't going to go long, as to where you can really benefit from a card like this. Just this format doesn't support cards like this. It's too fast. Followed Footsteps, also a little bit too slow. This isn't a control deck where you can really grind out games and go for slowness and force the game to go long. So you basically have to naturally hope that you get to turn 5, get to play this, and they don't kill you that turn, and you get some advantage out of this. But then, even if you get only 1 dude out of it, it's still not good enough. Then you need to get 2 dudes out of it before it starts to really pay off. By that time, you know, it's turn like 8. I don't know, like, really. I mean, it's great in Crosswinds. It's even kind of decent in Aura Servant, because you end up drawing a lot of cards in Aura Servants. But in this deck, no, just this deck doesn't really support the card. If you naturally gotta get there, then it's not gonna be good enough. Gas Lord of Fugue. It's hilarious to say Gas Lord of Fuck You, but his name is Gas Lord of Fugue. This guy is actually a big bomb. He's a threat on his own. 4/4 for 5, not too shabby, especially not for this deck. And he's unblockable, and you get to choose what they discard, and they even exile it. So that's amazing. This guy's just on his own. He can win games, so that's good. This deck kind of lacks cards like that that can win the game on their own and just go nuts. And this is one of them. Grimgrin is another one. Well, not technically on its own. You have to sacrifice creatures. So a lot of people think that Grimgrin is actually a really bad card, but in fact he is, I would say, the best card in this deck. He is definitely an undervalued card. So why is this guy good? Like, you read him, right? 5 cost, 5/5. Alright, so his stats are good, especially for this deck. Alright, let's read on. Enter the battlefield tapped, doesn't untap during your untap step. Wait, what? I never really get to use him. Then I have to sacrifice another creature to make him useful. And then he only untaps once, and then I can attack. And use some abilities, and then he's tapped again, and I have to sacrifice another creature to use him again. That seems horrible, right? That seems terrible. But that's until you realize that, hey, what really happens when you play this guy is he enters tapped. You go to the opponent's turn, now they can't attack you. Why? Because if they attack you, you sack a dude, Grim Grin untaps, and blocks their guy, and it's now a 6/6, and probably a lot bigger than whatever they're attacking you with. So, that's pretty good, right? And then they say go, you get to untap, and you get to attack with this guy. They have to sack a dude, so you sacked one dude, they lost 2, and you're attacking for 8 damage. Or 7. You're attacking for 7 damage that turn. 7 is a lot for a 5-cost creature. And you kill 2 of their guys. And plus, you get to sack your worst guy and kill their best guy. So he is actually amazingly good. Amazingly good. So definitely run him. Just take my advice and run this guy. Try him. You will be convinced as soon as you see him in action. He's ridiculous. Nemesis of Reason can win the game on his own. Another reason why I think this deck should probably be good comboed with the mill deck in Two-Headed Giant. But hey, don't take my advice, because I don't play Two-Headed Giant. I got no idea. I got no idea whatsoever. So, but that's what I think this deck is for. But this guy can win the games on his own. Really, if you count, most of the time by the end of the game, people have like 30 to 40 cards in their deck. So that means this thing has to attack 3 or 4 times and you've won. It's not too shabby, you know. So he's a win condition in and of itself. And with 7 toughness, he's pretty much going to survive a lot of things. So that's good. He doesn't need to have a lot of power, because he wins by milling them. And he doesn't even need to connect to make his ability go off. So that's pretty good. He's not great. He's not amazing or anything. But he works, you know. He's a win condition. So Painful Quandary, not a win condition. There's in cards like this, we've seen them before. There's the card in Ancient Wilds, Lurking Predators, where is global enchantment, and whenever your opponent casts a spell, you get to look at the top card of your library. If it's a creature card, you may put it onto the battlefield. That's great and all. Don't run that card. There's also... So the problem with that card is that by the time you get to play it, it's too late usually in the game for it to matter. And the opponent can just say, well, I don't cast a spell, I don't care. You know, if they're already winning. And they're probably already winning because you're holding that card the whole game. Because you don't draw it whenever you need it, of course not. That would just be too fortuitous. That doesn't really happen that often. So you're sitting there with that card in hand, and that probably means you missed like a 3-drop or 2-drop you would have wanted to play otherwise. Which means you're slow and behind, and then turn 6 you play that. And the opponent doesn't care because he's winning the race and he doesn't play anything. So you don't get to use its ability. Stuff like that. So that's why Lurking Predators is a bad card. There's also Force Fruition in the mill deck. Same story there, really. Yeah, just exactly the same story as Lurking Predators. Is bad because being a 6-cost spell, you don't cast it until pretty late in the game when you're probably losing the game, especially with mill, because that is usually what happens with mill anyways. And now especially since you're holding a 6-cost enchantment. So, and then they don't cast a spell because they're winning the game anyway. Painful Quandary, that's different. Why? Because this is 5 mana. And that 1 mana makes such a big difference for an enchantment like this. Because that means you can play it when it's still relevant. That just makes it so much more likely that by the time you're playing this, you're not just extremely losing the game or anything like that. So, and then it becomes a win condition in and of itself. Especially if you're starting to if you're discarding them one card at a turn. Let's say you've got this thing out and you've got Gas Lord of Fugue, right? So their top deck, and they got their 1 spell. Well, if they play it, they take 5 life. They lose 5 life. If they don't play it, then you attack with Ghast Lord of Fugue, and you get to exile that card, so they never get to do anything. So yeah, basically there are plenty of ways with this deck to force them to take the 5 life rather than being able to discard a card, because they don't have those cards to discard. So that's great. And the fact that this is 5 mana makes it much better than Lurking Predators or Force Fruition. Ribbons of Night, it's removal, it's great. So now you get something to deal with the 4 toughness guy, but you don't have anything to deal with the 5 toughness guy now. And I guess I keep forgetting this whenever I talk about removal, but this is there too. So you got 8 removal cards, but all of them are pretty conditional, and they're great if they work because they do other stuff as well. But if they don't work, then it's kind of really sad. But yeah, this card is kind of like Prophetic Bolt, or indeed the card in Grinning Malice that cascades. Can't think of the name, but you get to draw a card off this, and you gain 4 life while killing their dude, so that's pretty good. Then 46 drop guys. Again, you know, there's not enough small stuff, small fries that are worth running, so you end up having to run a few 6 drop guys. Unfortunate, but that's the case. And from these 6, these are actually not that bad, luckily. So Laquatus Champion, 6 cost guy, and he's basically like Inferno Titan, a little bit more higher risk reward, but I guess that kind of fits the deck, right? Just like the removal spells. They lose 6 life, so this gets past Worship at least, and gets past the Worm guy in Ancient Wilds. So the problem with it is, of course, if they immediately kill it, then they gain the 6 life before losing the 6 life, because it's an ability that has to trigger and go off. So yeah, although, no, yeah, you target the player as soon as this enters, then it has to trigger. Then in that time they can react, and since you already targeted the player, the card knows which player should gain the 6 life back. So if they're at 6, you play this, they kill it before they lose the life, then they gain 6 life, and then they lose 6 life, so they don't die, basically. But if you play it at 7 mana, then you can regen it and get around that whole thing, so that's good. Of course, it really sucks if they play Agony Warp in response or something like that, because you can't regen from it losing toughness. So yeah, the free toughness can be a problem there, especially in the mirror match. It just seems like it was put into this deck just so you can feel really bad when you're playing the mirror match and somebody Agony Warps it. But oh well. I guess, I mean, it's equal, because they could have that happen as well if they're on the guy. Rexiel the Risen Deep, pretty good. I mean, Swamp Walk is great because a lot of the most powerful decks in the game have swamps in them. And then Island Walk is great because this deck kind of struggles against blue decks. I mean, who doesn't, right? But this deck kind of does, because it already has trouble with tempo. And blue decks really benefit from that. Really try to get you on the tempo advantage. So it does some stuff when it attacks, but I would run it if it didn't. But it's kind of cool. I mean, you can play spells. Sometimes, again, you can get a really cool spell with it. So that's good. But it's a really high toughness creature and pretty high power creature. So again, just like Nemesis of Reason and Ghast Lord of Fugue, this guy wins games on his own, and that's why he's good. Laquatus Champion, not so much winning games on his own, but he usually comes in to deal the last remaining 6 damage you need to finish the opponent off. Harvester of Souls, not that great, a little bit weak for his cost, and Death Touch is great on a small dude to block their big dudes with. Having it on a big dude, or at least a dude that should be big, means that you trade your big dude for the small dude anyways, and I mean, yeah. So that means he's not that great. And again, your removal is a little bit conditional, so you may not be able to kill your opponent's creatures with your removal and be able to draw cards off this guy. And besides, why would you even want to draw cards most of the time? By the time you get to this guy and get to play him, the game is advanced to a state where you pretty much have to have whatever you need in hand already. Hellcarver Demon, I considered running this guy just for the fact that it's a 6/6 flyer for 6. And his ability doesn't really matter. But again though, you can make his ability work because you can discard your opponent. I'm not really running all the discard or anything, but I mean I'm running some of it. So that means that the worst case scenario with this guy is usually if you attack with it, you get to play some spells, you have to exile all your stuff, and now all you have is this guy and some small guys or something like that. And then they waited for that moment and now they kill it, and now you got nothing. That's of course the biggest problem with this guy, but I mean, this deck can discard them so that you know they don't have the kill spell to do that. And as well, you're swinging for 6 damage, so it shouldn't matter. They should die. And besides, if it really comes to your big 6 cost guy having to solve the problem and win the game for you, then if this guy fails, if this guy fails, then you probably lose anyway. So if this guy fails, then you lose even more, but losing is losing, so whatever. Mephideros Vampire, really small for his cost, and he has some ability that whoever, I don't know, nobody cares. It's never gonna happen. Like, there's there was a 4/4 guy with flying for 5 mana that has this ability, but only did it to himself. And I think that was the Sengir Vampire, right? I think that was one of the very first vampires in the game. Maybe even the first. I don't know exactly, but it's a very old card. And that had this ability, but only did it for himself. And it never actually triggered. And I can see just exactly the same thing happen with this guy. So his ability really doesn't matter. And he's really small for his cost. So don't run him. Mind Leech Mass. Now we're at 8 mana and I don't care. There's no ramp in this deck. This isn't gonna happen, guys. Just never gonna happen. So that's the deck. Try and be a little bit aggressive. Try and deal with the biggest trouble this deck has in 1v1 at least. And still not a great deck. But we can, like, this is the best I can make it. That's what I feel. So we'll see how I can do with this deck. So look forward to some gameplay. And if this deck build helps you in any way, then go ahead and leave your thumbs up. And also if you like the video, of course, or you just like me, hey, that can happen. Go ahead and leave your thumbs up in that case. Favorite the video if you want, and go ahead and subscribe if you want to see more of me. Well guys, my name's been Nemo, my name will still be Nemo in the next video, and I'll see you then indeed. Thanks for watching, and have a great day. Bye bye. Peace.